Listen, there's a particular kind of madness that lives in the human brain, and Thryss didn't understand it until she watched Elliot scale a vertical cliff face with nothing between him and death except fingertips and audacity. They call it recreation. They smile when they say it. They actually seek out the things that would kill them just to feel the thrill of not dying. That's the thing about death worlders. They don't just survive impossible conditions, they get bored without them, and when you're partnered with one in a combat unit, sooner or later they'll invite you to understand why. This is that story. This is the moment Thryss stopped thinking of him as her squad mate and started thinking of him as something else entirely. This is about falling and being caught, about trust written in stone and sweat, about the terror of wanting someone who treats gravity like a suggestion. The sun rose over Cliffmark Station in shades of amber and gold. Morning air carried the scent of dust and heated rock, that particular smell of stone warming after a cold night. Thryss stood at the base of the eastern cliff formations, her secondary eyelids flickering rapidly, a Scythe stress response she couldn't suppress. Elliot was already halfway up the rock face. No ropes, no harness, no safety equipment of any kind. Just bare hands finding cracks in stone, muscles bunching and releasing, his body moving upward with fluid economy that made physics look optional. Her throat sacs constricted. Her people didn't do heights. Their homeworld's low gravity meant falling rarely killed, but it also meant they'd never developed the bone density or muscle mass for serious climbing. She'd seen the human physiology reports. Elliot's skeletal structure could withstand 3 times the gravitational force her body experienced. His muscle fiber composition combined fast and slow twitch in ratios that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Everything about him was denser, heavier, built for crushing pressure she couldn't imagine surviving. 25 meters up now, he paused on a narrow ledge, one hand gripping an outcrop barely larger than his palm, and looked down. "You coming?" His voice carried easily through the still morning, casual, like he wasn't dangling from a vertical surface that would pulverize her on impact. Thryss's claws dug into the soil. She'd held a choke point with this human 3 weeks ago, while their squad evacuated civilians from a structure that was actively collapsing around them. She'd watched shrapnel tear through his shoulder, and he'd kept firing, kept moving, kept talking civilians through their panic while blood soaked his uniform. She trusted him with her life in combat, but this wasn't combat. This was something else entirely, and it terrified her. "I don't understand the purpose," she called up, proud that her translator kept her voice mostly steady. "It's fun, fun." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Thryss had studied human psychology during integration training, passed all the compatibility assessments, learned to read their facial expressions despite their alarming lack of pelt coloration to indicate emotional states. But some concepts still eluded complete understanding. Humans sought danger recreationally. They threw themselves from functional aircraft for entertainment. They strapped accelerators to their feet and launched down mountains covered in frozen water. They consumed biological toxins that would hospitalize other species and called it going out for drinks. Death sports, her instructor had called them. Voluntary exposure to lethal conditions for the biochemical rewards of survival. Elliot descended as easily as he'd climbed. He dropped the last 4 meters and landed in a crouch that should have shattered every bone below his knees. His body absorbed the impact with casual grace, tendons and ligaments built for punishment. He straightened, brushed dust from his hands, and the morning sun caught in his hair. Dark, short, practical for combat. Thryss's thermal vision painted him in warm oranges and reds, his core temperature elevated from exertion. Sweat gleamed on his exposed skin, that absurdly inefficient thermoregulation system that involved secreting salt water through millions of microscopic pores. She watched a drop of moisture track down his throat, followed its path, realized she was staring, and jerked her gaze back to his face. Heat flooded her own skin in patterns she hoped her uniform concealed. Elliot stepped closer. His expression had softened into something quieter, more serious. "It clears my head," he said, "after combat. After seeing what we saw last week, I need this. Need to focus on something simple where the rules make sense. Hand, foot, rock, repeat. No politics, no paperwork, no wondering if we made the right call. His voice carried an edge of something raw. You could die, Thryss said. Could, probably won't. That's not reassuring, he grinned. The expression crinkled the corners of his eyes, transformed his features from combat-ready to almost boyish. Humans showed aggression through bared teeth, but they also used the gesture for pleasure, affection, humor. Context was everything. This smile reached his eyes, softened his jaw, made her pulse jump in her throat. Trust me, he asked. I trust you in combat. This is just vertical combat with better views. Against what enemy? Gravity. Fatigue, fear myself sometimes. The last part came out quieter, more honest than she expected. He stepped even closer. Thryss held her ground, tilting her head back to maintain eye contact. Elliot stood a head taller, broader through shoulders that looked like they could tear through bulkheads. But he moved around her with careful awareness, always giving space to retreat if she needed it. Pack bonding protocols, the integration manual called it. Humans formed intense social attachments even across species lines. They modulated their behavior to avoid threatening packmates, especially smaller ones. Thryss wasn't small by sci-fi standards. She stood average height for her people, with lean muscle and sharp reflexes. But next to Elliot, she felt the size differential acutely. Felt it in ways that made her skin warm beneath her scales. I'll stay on the ground, he said. If you're not comfortable, I won't push. I just thought maybe you'd want to try something that's not about surviving, you know? Something that's just about being alive. The offer settled something in her chest that had been tight since the mission. Since watching that ceiling come down. Since pulling that child from the rubble and feeling the terrible fragility of life in her hands. Show me the route, she said. His face brightened like she'd given him a gift. He pulled a small fabric pouch from his pocket and tipped powder into her palm. Chalk. Dries the sweat, gives you better grip. Your claws will actually give you an advantage I don't have. Their fingers brushed during the transfer. His skin was warm, rougher than hers, with calluses she could feel even through her scales. The contact lasted a fraction too long. Neither of them moved to break it immediately. Heat signatures spiked in her thermal vision. His face, his throat. Human blushing, increased blood flow to surface capillaries. Involuntary response to emotional stimuli. She pulled her hand back carefully. Elliot cleared his throat and pointed up the cliff face. See that shelf about 12 meters up. That's the first target. Holds are pretty obvious once you start looking. Use your claws like hooks in the cracks. Thryss studied the rock. Millennia ago, her ancestors had climbed trees in their forest canopies before descending to the plains. The genetics remained vestigial but functional. Her claws weren't decorative, they could grip, anchor, hold. What if I fall, she asked. I'll catch you. You can't possibly arrest my falling mass. Want to bet? She turned to stare at him fully. Elliot's expression held complete confidence. No bravado, no performance, just calm certainty. He believed he could stop her fall through sheer physical strength. The terrifying part was that he probably could. Humans had earned their space orc nickname through more than reputation. Their bone density was obscene. She'd read the reports, seen the medical scans. Their skeletal structure contained more calcium phosphate than any other known sapient species. They could sprint, then immediately transition to endurance running that would exhaust prey species within hours. They healed from injuries that would cripple others. They could hold their breath for minutes, survive temperature extremes that would send sci-fi into thermal shock, eat biological toxins recreationally. And they thought climbing cliffs was fun. All right, Thryss said, but if I die, I'm haunting you. Deal. Though I should warn you, I'm told I'm annoying when haunted. Despite herself, she felt her jaw muscles relax slightly. The sci-fi equivalent of a smile. She approached the rock face. Up close, the texture resolved into sharp detail. Cracks, crevices, rough patches that might support weight, smooth sections that definitely wouldn't. She reached up experimentally and found a handhold that felt solid. Her claws gripped better than she'd expected, hooking into irregularities her finger pads couldn't detect. Good, Elliot said from directly behind her, close enough that she felt his body heat. Now find something for your feet. She tested a small outcrop. Held, push up with your legs, not your arms. Legs are way stronger. Arms are just for balance and hanging on. Thryss pushed. Her body rose. She reached for the next handhold. Found it. Her claws caught in a crack that wouldn't have supported smooth fingers. 3 meters up, she paused. The ground looked farther away than it should. Her heart rate accelerated, drumming against her ribs. Instinct screamed at her to descend immediately. "You're doing great," Elliot called from below. "Focus on what's in front of you. Don't look down, look up." Her breathing had accelerated past healthy levels. She forced it to slow, reaching for the meditative state scifi could access when needed, a physiological regulation that lowered heart rate and sharpened focus. She touched that space now, felt her pulse steady. The panic receded to manageable levels. She climbed higher, 5 meters, 7, 10, each movement became its own small victory. Hand, foot, test weight, commit, reach. The rhythm was oddly soothing. No room for thinking about mission reports or after-action debriefs or the nightmares that woke her at 300. Just the immediate problem of where to place her body next. The rock was cooler than she expected, shaded from the morning sun. Her fingers found textures, rough sandstone that scraped her scales, smooth sections where wind had polished the surface over millennia, sharp edges that required careful grip placement. Her thermal vision picked up subtle variations in the stone's temperature, showing her which sections had been exposed to sun recently and which remained in perpetual shadow. At 11 meters, she encountered her first real challenge. The obvious handhold was too far to reach comfortably. She'd have to commit her weight to her current position and stretch, trusting her grip completely. Her claws flexed involuntarily. "You see it," Elliot called. He'd climbed parallel to her, staying just below and to her left. Close enough to help, far enough to give her space. "I see it. You can make it. That hold is bomber solid. I've used it a dozen times. Bomber solid." Human climbing slang she'd learned from overhearing his conversations with other Deathworlders. Meant unquestionably reliable, capable of surviving explosive force. They had names for everything: crimps, jugs, slopers, pockets. A whole vocabulary for interacting with stone. She committed, her body stretched, her claws caught the edge. Held, she pulled herself up and found a foothold that felt secure. Her thermal signature spiked with the rush of success. "Nice," Elliot said. "You're a natural. I feel like I'm about to die." "That's how you know you're doing it right." She looked over at him. He'd matched her position, hanging from the rock face with the same casual ease she'd used standing on flat ground. His arms showed the definition of active engagement, but not strain. Those ridiculous human muscles working well below capacity. "How is this easy for you?" she asked. "It's not. I'm just good at pretending. You're not even breathing hard." "Okay, it's a little bit easy. But that's just because humans are built wrong. We evolved to chase prey until it died of exhaustion, so we're kind of overpowered for most things. Makes us terrible at giving up." That sounds exhausting. It really is, but it makes us great at annoying things through sheer persistence. Like climbing rocks, and befriending aliens who probably should run away from us but don't. His eyes held hers for a moment that stretched longer than physics allowed. The shelf Elliot had indicated came within reach. She pulled herself onto it and crouched, gripping the rock, limbs trembling with adrenaline dump. Elliot appeared beside her. He must have climbed a parallel route because she hadn't heard him, hadn't felt vibrations in the stone. He settled onto the shelf with relaxed confidence, legs dangling over the edge like gravity was someone else's problem. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," she managed. "Exactly." She looked at him, really looked. His eyes were brown with flecks of gold visible in direct sunlight, framed by laugh lines that hadn't been there in the mission photos from 2 years ago. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, shrapnel from the Redwick incident, if she remembered the after-action report correctly. His hands were scarred too, knuckles marked with old tissue, evidence of a life spent doing dangerous things with dangerous equipment. He caught her staring and she didn't look away this time. "The view's better from here," Elliot said quietly, his voice dropping to something softer, more intimate. He wasn't looking at the landscape. Thryss's temperature regulation system shifted, warming her core. Her scales probably showed the heat signature change, but she couldn't bring herself to care. "We should climb higher," she said. "Yeah, show me the route." They climbed for another hour. Elliot led, pointing out holds, demonstrating weight transfer techniques. At 15 meters, he showed her how to chimney up a crack by pressing her back against one wall and feet against the other, using opposing pressure to ascend. The position forced them close together, his chest against her back as he guided her hands to the correct placement. "Like this," he said, his breath warm against her neck. "Feel how the pressure holds you in place." She felt something, but it wasn't just the physics of climbing. At 19 meters, they traversed laterally along a narrow ledge that made her heart race even as her claws found purchase in invisible seams. The traverse required careful footwork, small precise movements, absolute trust in friction and angle. Elliot moved ahead of her, his body graceful in motion, every shift calculated for economy. The rock changed character as they climbed. Lower sections were weathered smooth, shaped by wind and rain. Higher up, the stone grew more aggressive, sharp crystals, protruding edges, angular features that bit into her scales but offered better grip. Wind picked up as they gained altitude, carrying scents from the valley, cooking fires from the station, the sharp ozone smell of energy weapons on the practice range, growing things from the hydroponics bay. At 23 meters, Thryss reached for a hold and felt it shift slightly under her weight. She froze. "Don't move," Elliot said immediately. His voice had gone sharp with focus. "Where's the loose hold?" "Left hand." The edge moved. "Okay. Don't weight it. Find something else with your right hand, up and to your right about 20 centimeters. There's a pocket. I don't see it. It's there. Trust me." She reached, fingers searching blind, found the depression in the rock. Her claws sank into it gratefully. "Now shift your weight right. Use the pocket." She moved. The loose hold scraped free and tumbled down the cliff face, clattering against stone before disappearing into scrub below. Her heart hammered. "You're good," Elliot said. "Holds fail sometimes. That's why you always maintain 3 points of contact. You didn't mention that part earlier. Didn't want to scare you before you started. I'm scared now." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it freeze you." They continued upward. Thryss's arms burned with accumulated fatigue. Her claws ached from constant flexing. Muscles she didn't know she had screamed complaints. But the rhythm had become meditative, almost trance-like. Hand, foot, test, commit, reach. Her world narrowed to texture and angle, weight distribution and friction coefficients. At 28 meters, they reached a wider ledge with actual space to sit comfortably. Elliot pulled a hydration container from the small pack on his back and offered it to her first. She drank, tasting salt from his backwash, metallic minerals from station water recycling systems, and something distinctly him. She handed it back. He drank without wiping the mouthpiece. The intimacy of it struck her suddenly, sharing water, tasting each other's sweat, sitting close enough that she felt his body heat in the cooling morning air. They sat in silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Below them, Cliffmark Station sprawled across the valley, prefab structures and defensive walls, the barracks where they bunked in separate wings. Mixed species integration was still new enough that command kept humans and non-humans in different environmental zones. Different atmospheric composition preferences, they claimed, different sleep cycles, different dietary needs. Thryss suspected it had more to do with lingering instinctive discomfort. Humans were predator-evolved. Most integrated species were prey stock. The responses ran deep, written in evolutionary code millions of years old. But Elliot had never triggered her flight reflex. Even in combat, even covered in blood and roaring battle cries that should have sent her running, she'd only felt safer when he was near. Pack bonding. She'd written it off as battlefield necessity. Trusted him because the alternative was death. Sitting here on this ledge, watching him drink from a container her mouth had touched, she wasn't sure that explanation held up anymore. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing me this. For understanding why I needed to stay on the ground at first. For not making me feel weak for being afraid." "You're not weak," Elliot said with immediate conviction. "You've got courage I don't have. You process 3 moves ahead in combat while I'm still reacting to the first one. You talked that kid down from panic last week while I just stood there like an idiot securing the perimeter. Somebody had to secure the perimeter. Anybody can secure a perimeter with enough ammunition. Not anybody can convince a terrified child that everything will be okay when the ceiling is literally collapsing around them. You did that in a language that isn't even your first one, staying calm enough that she believed you even though you were probably as scared as she was. I was terrified, Thryss admitted quietly. I know. I could see your thermal signature spiking, but you didn't let her see it. That's real courage, being scared and doing it anyway. You weren't scared? Elliot laughed, but it came out brittle. I was having a panic attack the entire time. Kept thinking about my sister. She was 8 when I left Earth for the integration program. That kid was her age, her exact age. Same hair color, even. You never mentioned a sister. Don't talk about her much. Makes it too real that I'm 20 light years away and she's growing up without me. She sent me a message last month. She's 12 now, starting secondary school. I've missed 4 years. His voice had gone rough. Why did you leave? Thryss asked carefully. He was quiet for a long time. Below them, the station came alive with morning shift changes, tiny figures moving between buildings like insects organizing for the day's work. My brother died, Elliot finally said. Training accident 3 days before he was supposed to ship out to the integration program. Freak equipment malfunction. They said he didn't suffer, but that's something people say to make themselves feel better. I found his diary later. He was so excited, had been counting down the days for months. He wanted to see other worlds, meet other species, be part of something bigger than Earth's problems. Elliot's hands had tightened on the water container, knuckles white. I took his slot, he continued. Someone had to. He'd worked too hard for it to just disappear. And I couldn't stay on Earth knowing he'd died wanting this, and I was just going to waste my life doing nothing with it. So here I am, climbing rocks on an alien planet, missing my sister, trying to honor my dead brother by not dying in stupid ways. The raw honesty hit her in the chest. I'm sorry, she said, because human custom demanded acknowledgement of loss even years later. Elliot turned to look at her. His eyes were wet, but he didn't let the tears fall. Why'd you volunteer for integration? He asked. Sci-fi don't volunteer, Thryss said. We're assigned based on aptitude testing. I tested high for cross-species compatibility and stress tolerance. Also, I can tolerate higher oxygen percentages than most of my people without getting intoxicated. That's not what I asked. She looked away, out over the valley. Fair point. My clutchmate was killed in a transport accident, she said, similar to your brother. Faulty maintenance on a cargo shuttle. 23 people died. She was a civilian contractor, just doing her job, and some human corporation cut corners on safety protocols to save credits. Her throat tightened around the words. I was angry, she continued. At humans, at the integration program, at every Deathworlder species that came in and acted like they owned the galaxy, because their planets tried to kill them and ours didn't. I volunteered to prove something. That sci-fi weren't weak. That we could fight alongside predator species without being prey. That we deserved respect. And now, Elliot asked quietly, now I sit on a cliff ledge with a human and don't feel like prey. What do you feel like? She turned to meet his eyes. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way humans rarely showed outside their own species. Safe, she said, seen, like maybe my clutchmate would approve of this if she could see it. Like maybe your brother would too. Elliot's hand moved across the stone between them, fingers spread, not touching but close enough that she felt heat radiating from his skin. Thryss turned her palm up. His fingers found hers. The contact sent electricity up her arm. His hand engulfed hers completely, rough calluses against her scales, his skin fever-hot compared to her cooler physiology. Humans ran metabolically hot, their systems producing constant excess thermal energy. Sci-fi were more efficient, adapted for desert climates where thermoregulation meant avoiding heat buildup. But she found herself leaning into his warmth now, drawn to it like something essential. Is this okay? Elliot asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. If command finds out about us, we'll both be reassigned. Different units, different stations. Integration protocols don't allow, I know, worth it. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tight. Yes, she whispered, me too. They sat like that as the sun climbed higher, hands linked, neither speaking. Words felt inadequate for what was happening between them. It was bigger than friendship, more complex than simple attraction, deeper than the pack bonding the integration manuals described. Eventually, the heat grew uncomfortable. Elliot stood first and pulled Thryss up smoothly. Their hands separated, but the warmth remained. Ready for the scary part? He asked. What's scarier than climbing up, coming back down? The descent proved him right. Going down required different skills entirely, trusting footholds you couldn't see, committing weight to uncertain purchase, fighting every instinct that screamed to maintain your current position. Elliot guided her through it with patience that made her chest ache. At 24 meters, he showed her how to downclimb by feel, testing holds with her toes before committing weight. His hand rested on her waist, steadying her, his touch warm even through her uniform. At 17 meters, they encountered an overhang that forced them to traverse diagonally, moving sideways across the cliff face with their bodies angled outward. Thryss's arms trembled with sustained effort. Her claws felt stripped raw. Almost there, Elliot said, "You're doing amazing. I can't feel my hands, that's normal, just a little further." At 8 meters, her foot slipped. She fell, time stretched. She saw the ground rushing up, registered that she was going to impact hard, felt her body tense for collision. And then Elliot caught her. He'd pushed off from the wall and intercepted her falling trajectory, wrapping one arm around her torso, while his other hand found a hold in the rock. They swung together, his body absorbing the momentum, his grip on stone somehow holding their combined weight. They hung there, pressed together, his heart hammering against her back. "Got you," he said into her ear. Her entire body was shaking. "I've got you," he repeated. "You're safe." Slowly, carefully, he lowered them both to the ground. When her feet touched earth, her legs gave out. Elliot caught her again, holding her upright until she could support her own weight. "That was terrifying," she managed. "Yeah, sorry. Should have warned you the descent is harder. You caught me, told you I would." She turned in his arms to face him. They were pressed together, his hands on her waist, her claws gripping his shoulders. Close enough that she saw individual droplets of sweat on his skin, close enough that his scent filled her nostrils, salt and stone dust and something distinctly him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Anytime." His eyes had gone dark, pupils dilated. His breathing had changed pitch. She recognized the signs: attraction, arousal, want. Her own thermal signature blazed in response. They stood like that, neither moving, the space between them charged with possibility. Elliot broke first, stepped back, gave her room. "We should head back," he said. "Before someone notices we're gone." Right, professional distance. Plausible deniability. They walked back toward the station in silence that felt different now, heavier, weighted with things they couldn't say, didn't dare name. As they approached the gates, Elliot's posture shifted subtly, shoulders squaring, space opening between them, expression settling into professional neutrality. Thryss mirrored the change automatically. But when they passed through the checkpoint and the guard waved them towards separate corridors, Elliot caught her hand briefly. A pulse-fast squeeze, there and gone before anyone could notice. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, voice carefully casual. "Same time." She watched him disappear down the corridor toward human quarters, then turned toward her own. Her muscles ached. Her claws were scraped raw. Her uniform was covered in rock dust and sweat, and she felt more settled than she had in weeks. That night, lying in her bunk, Thryss pulled up her personal log and added a new entry. Participated in recreational climbing activity with teammate. Noted therapeutic benefit for processing combat stress. Recommend continued joint training exercises. Clinical, professional. Completely failing to capture what had actually happened on that cliff. Her communicator chimed softly. A message from Elliot. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about that moment on the ledge." She stared at the text, her scales warming despite the climate-controlled environment. Another message appeared, not the climbing part. Her claws tapped out a response carefully. "I know which moment you mean. 3 dots pulsed, disappeared, reappeared. Tomorrow's going to be a long wait. Thryss felt something in her chest that she didn't have words for in either sci-fi or the common trade language. Something warm and terrifying and entirely welcome. Get some rest, Deathworlder. You'll need your strength. Why's that? Because tomorrow I'm picking the route. The response came instantly. Can't wait. She powered down the communicator and settled into her bunk. Sleep came easier than it had since the mission. Her dreams didn't replay collapsing ceilings or children screaming. Instead, she dreamed of hands finding holds in stone, of warmth beside her in high places, of brown eyes with gold flecks catching sunlight, of a smile that made gravity feel optional, of falling, of being caught, of climbing higher tomorrow and the day after, and every day after that until the height didn't matter anymore because she trusted the person beside her completely, of something that felt dangerously like hope.